So that's kind of the real answer for why
you don't see those crumbs and dust anyway. I mean, what do you want to keep them out for? You push them in.
Yeah, that's where you hide them.
Instead of trying to clean up your floor, you just sweep it underneath and you're done.
Nah, I got the dog. The dog cleans all that stuff up for me. Welcome to the Fine Home Building Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Justin Fink. I'll be your host. Today, I'm joined by Brian Pontalillo.
Hello.
And there it is. And Rob Yegan.
Hey.
All right. Email address, fhbpodcast@taunton.com. That's where you can get in touch with us. That's where all the questions that we're going to go over today came to us. And we encourage you to send in comments, concerns, complaints, critiques, and cookies. Jeff, why doesn't the clock work?
Carrie unplugged the battery, and it takes like 24 hours before it realizes it's...
What?
Yeah.
What do you mean? A battery doesn't make our clock work?
No, because it's a radio clock, so it has to wait till it gets the signl from...
Oh, Jesus. All right. You can send a clock to that same email address. Another C word. So what's going on, gentlemen?
That was good.
Not too much.
Brian?
Got nothing.
Really? Because right before we started the show...
I'm waiting on my drywall delivery. I'm waiting for the weather to break.
Right before we started the show, you said you wanted to talk about spray paint.
And Brian has an interesting project.
And I said, and just a little reveal for the audience, and I said, as soon as I'm done with the intro, why don't you bring it up?
Well, I was bringing it up because...
You didn't bring it up, actually.
I'll bring it up now. I'm bringing it up again because I think we talked about it in the podcast. And sometimes I get confused about what we talk about on the podcast and what we talk about while we're having coffee or lunch.
I live my life in the podcast.
But you do.
Yeah. I'm up here all day.
But I think we talked about it on the podcast. I have, because you, Justin, said you had done this before, I have French door on the bedroom. The bedroom opens to living space in my house.
French door?
French door.
A French door.
French door. You're saying French door. It's a divided light interior door, correct?
You got to define French door now?
I thought you were trying to say you have a pair of French doors, but you made it, I have French door.
Yeah, because I have one.
You have a French door. Okay, go ahead. Off to a strong start, Jeff.
Start. I have a French door.
Okay.
Yes, there you go.
On my bedroom, which opens to living space.
So maybe he was doing like the sheep thing. I have, sheep.
Maybe.
Okay, go ahead.
I got nothing. So, for all these years, we've had a shade on the back of the door for privacy. You got a bedroom that opens to a living space, you have to have privacy, a private door, like the French door, but had a shade on the back of it, and didn't really like the shade. It took away from the clean look of a French door.
Yeah.
So you had suggested that I could actually fog the glass on the French door, and you mentioned a couple ways that you can apply a film. I think maybe,
a couple of ways?
Yeah, you can apply a film. You can buy...
one way.
You could actually get rolls of film
Yes.
are like kind of cling.
Yes, this sounds like me.
And you can buy cans of spray.
Yes.
That etch the glass.
Yes.
They actually etch the glass.
I believe
it's
they
not
etch
like
the glass.
a thin paint.
I think it's kind of both.
I think it's lacquer. I don't think it's etching the glass.
I think you're the one that said it etches the glass.
So what's the product that you used?
Regardless, it's a $5-7 bottle of frosted glass from the hardware store. Frosted glass
which brand?
spray. I'll get a photo of it and we can put it up on the show notes page.
Because it's possible that they're different. I mean, it's possible that there's different options for this. The one I use, I think, was just like a lacquer.
Okay.
And the reason why I think they chose a lacquer for this is that you spray it in multiple coats, at least the one I used, and it kind of blends into itself and leaves a blur.
They said, give it 10 minutes. Directions say 10 minutes to dry and then spray again.
Spray again. Okay.
And it works wonderfully.
Yeah.
Like, it really worked well. Like,
it looks great.
It looks great. Very even coat. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't find any. I sprayed the back so that the front still is smooth, looks like glass. I sprayed the back side.
And did you mask the door, or did you just
I masked
go for it?
the door. I didn't have to get really diligent with my masking because I was going to sand and paint after. I painted the door too at the same time.
Gotcha. Yep.
So I masked it to, so that I wasn't getting tons of overspray all over the wood, but I didn't try to get a clean line.
It really doesn't leave you'd think it would leave kind of a gritty texture on the surface of the wood. I didn't find that it really did. I think you can probably get away without masking. I mean, you would maybe just do it when you have bare wood and then...
You might be able to. I didn't notice. I'm sure there was overspray in the door, and I didn't feel or notice any of it as I prepped the door and painted the door.
Right. I actually heard about it from Bob Goodfellow, our art director,
Yeah.
because he did it on a
light fixture.
light
didn't he?
fixture in his
yeah.
kitchen or something.
What did you do it on? Sorry, I may have missed
I
that.
did it on a French door going into a bathroom for a bar that I was working on.
Same
a
results.
cocktail
Super
bar.
super even.
I had a couple of spots. I've used it a couple of times. I'm trying to think of the other occasions that I've used it, but that was the one that comes to mind. Oh, I think I did another entry door for a different restaurant with the same technique. Again, I did it on the inside because I don't think it would hold up to the weather. You can, so you pull the trigger on the rattle can, and this would be the same thing with spray paint. You sometimes get that like circle before you kind of move. So if you hold the can in one spot, you will get like a circle in this, even in the frost. So you got to it's almost like you got to mist it.
Well, yeah, and I even got a couple of drips that you get a little build up on the nozzle, and then it drips down onto your surface. But the next coats just took care of that, and you can't tell that there were drips at all by the third coat.
Did you put it on pretty wet? Like, did they tell you to like kind of? It's not so much like you're fogging it. You're almost like you're putting on spray paint. You're trying to put on.
I feel like I did it about the same as I would do. Would use spray paint. Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to. I would, if it was the first time using it, it might be advisable to play with it on a
Test
glass or something.
Like spray paint, you want to keep it moving.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be spraying without it being moving. And like spray paint, I found that a few light coats worked great. Like when I spray paint, I'd light coats.
Yeah.
And so
Minimal protection you're looking for?
Yeah.
it was excellent, and I'm sure that it costs a lot less to get a door with regular glass and to do that yourself than it would cost to buy that door to special order that door with frosted glass.
Yeah.
Because it's, like I said, it's a $7 can, and I didn't even use it all up on a door.
Yeah.
So
What are you gonna do with the rest of it?
I was wondering about that.
What else are you gonna frost?
Maybe the bottom of the windshield on my motorcycle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Because I think it'll look good. Where the instruments are behind the
Not bad.
windshield.
Yeah, you don't want to see that.
Wow.
All right.
I was just kidding.
There
but
you go.
You really had a reason.
I had an idea.
You had an idea. Yeah. Good for you. I was just speaking of paint. I was just working with some milk paint recently.
Oh, I love that
used the
stuff.
oldfashionedmilkpaint.com. If people have not used it, it's essentially a pigmented powder, and you mix it with water, and you brush it on, and it gives you that kind of chalky appearance. Or you can, put a top coat of something over it, like oil or poly or even wax, and it will kind of a little more sheen if you do that.
And you can use it to get solid finishes. You can use it to get sort of more translucent finishes.
It's pretty awesome, but
it's pretty awesome.
But it reminded me of this because we're talking about touching up the frosted glass. You can't touch up milk paint. It's like you got to do a full coat. If you get tempted, like, oh, that spot didn't quite cover, and you go back and try and dab it, it doesn't dry. You can see it, which I learned the hard way.
So I
over the
recall
years.
the bathroom vanity project that
Yes.
you built and I photographed.
Yes.
And there was, you painted that with milk paint, correct?
Yep.
Didn't you have some finishing difficulty in terms of it being not ultra, but there's some blotching going on, right?
That's what I'm talking about. Is
So
if you
is that
try and go
just
back and touch up a spot.
Oh, is that what happened?
Yeah.
Oh,
you gotta
okay.
do full coats.
You
got
gotta
to
do full coats.
I gotcha.
Sort of like, really, high sheen paint is like that too.
Yes.
A little bit of touch up shows that if you're using regular water based paint and you're going flat stuff, you can touch it up like crazy. Even maybe the mattes and maybe even into the satins. But once you get into the semi gloss and gloss, like your touch ups show. They just take on it's almost like they just take on more of a different sheen or something, and
It's like a flash.
you just can't
flashes
you just
through.
can't you just kind of can't get away with it.
But and while we're on this topic, I'm reminded again. See, gentlemen, this is how you fill a show. You just riff. So we did another cabinet for my kitchen, and I experimented with doing. I think it was Valspar paint from Lowe's, but I don't remember. And I got a flat paint or a matte finish. I can't remember what theirs is called. And I painted the whole outside of it. It was just poplar and plywood. And then after it dried, I scuffed the entire surface with a fine like a Scotch-Brite pad. They sell them in the same place they sell sandpaper for scuffing up a finish between coats and taking down the little dust nibs and things in a finish, and it just roughed up the painted finish enough that it looked like milk paint.
Yeah,
And it worked. I was like, wow, this is great. It looked so good.
So that was my question. Why milk paint instead of a flat or matte paint, which is probably easier to apply?
Well, milk paint's a traditional
And
finish.
I think it still looks different. Milk paint looks like milk paint. It has an antique-y quality to it. It looks different than even flat paint from flat water-based paint.
It's because it's blotchy.
It's also completely non-toxic. All natural. There's a certain.
It's nostalgia.
Should be in the codes.
Yeah,
Okay. We'll get there. Okay.
Well, okay, one more thing. While we're riffing. So as we learned on the show last week, I finally put my kitchen cabinets in. Been talking about my kitchen cabinets forever.
Yeah.
And it reminded me how much finishes change and how quickly finishes change. And it's particularly how dark stained woods get over time.
I thought you were going to say that you waited so long between coats that the products were no longer made, and you had to switch to a different brand.
Same products, same finishing technique, and bringing the new stuff in and seeing how it's basically stained pine, seeing how light it is compared to stuff that I did 5 years ago.
Yeah,
how dark that's gotten.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Aged wood looks really good. I mean, finishes not always, because the clear finishes can turn a little yellowish, and I would imagine yours, because you were going over pine, they almost had a yellow tinge to start with.
It doesn't matter if they yellow so much on.
And I did the same
pine.
thing on something I just built. I had a natural pine top, and I did boiled linseed oil. When I put the first coat on, it was like yellow, and I went, oh boy. And then it dried, and it looks great.
Yeah,
it just looks natural, but there's definitely some scary moments in finishing. What did Matt Berger say? He used to work at woodworking. They should call it ruining instead of finishing. What was that? You had something about paint too, didn't you, Rob? You just said before we started. You had something about paint.
I think we touched on it in a previous episode, or on that Graco sprayer that you have. They've got the cordless version and then the corded version, which is like that small handheld unit with the small canister that screws on beneath the...
Did we talk about that on that JLC live
I think we did.
episode? I can't remember.
I think we touched on it because it's a booth that I wanted to check out, and I know that you've got one of those sprayers.
Well, I have the corded one.
Which is about half the price. My understanding is that is half the price of the cordless one.
I'm hesitant, though, to say that mine is the same model as the cordless in every way except for the battery and the cord, because I know that there's two levels of corded Graco, and they look almost identical except for like a little color scheme change. But one of them is listed as DIY and like DIY projects, and one of them is like more of a pro level or more serious use.
Which one do you have?
I think I have the higher one, the slightly more expensive
And you
one.
can swap tips and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I haven't tried that, but I don't know if it's slightly different tips. And somebody wrote me a great email with answers to these things, and I was trying like hell to find it, and I don't know. I just did a big email dump, and I'm afraid I lost it in there. So hopefully that person.
But you recommend that for a spray rig if you don't want to go.
Well, here's what you got to know about
full on and get a big airless sprayer.
It's a lot like an airless sprayer in the sense that it dumps a lot of paint on. Like that's the thing about spraying. And people go, well, you're going through a lot of paint. And in some cases, that's good. Because, like Brian and I, we've talked about this on the show. You want to get a lot of paint on, especially in an exterior project. That's a good thing. If you want to have finer control over how much paint, though, I think that's when you start getting into the category of something like a Fuji Mini Mite or some other HVLP system where you've thinned the paint down and you can kind of almost get more of a mist. This is throwing a lot of paint around.
Is it good for because I've got some trim work and built-ins coming up.
I think it'll be good for that.
Perfect for that kind of application.
Like for
interior
instance,
doors and stuff, maybe.
Yeah. For instance, I'm doing I used it on my porch. That's when I bought it. So I did the whole ceiling.
Oh, really?
The beadboard ceiling, and I did all the exterior trim. It's great. I've seen people use it for, when you have a bunch of boards, and even like you're on sawhorses, you got everything set up, you're trimming like the rakes and the eaves and everything on your house. You can just cut everything, hit it with the sprayer, a couple of quick coats while it's laid on sawhorses, dries quick, and then they go right in. You don't have to be up on a ladder painting. It's just that kind of real simple painting that I think it really excels at. If you're going to be like in and out of cabinets and details and a lot of raised panels, I think you're going to start to find limitations in that system.
Because of the size of the gun and how much paint?
Yeah, because you don't want to throw a ton of paint at something with a lot of detail or a lot of ins and outs, because that's when you start running into sags and drips.
Right.
And, yeah. Right now, I'm sure I talked about this, but I have like a little shed roofed extension off my garage workshop. And now that the weather's finally breaking into spring, I've going back out there and putting the siding on. I had left it as zip system sheathing on the walls and the roof for the whole winter. Held up great, no leaks. It's like, and, you know, that's dangerous for me. It's like, well,
that's done.
I wonder how many more years I can get out of this. But and so I was struggling with how I'm going to trim this out. It's a pretty low slung, wide thing, so I wanted to give it a little more look of height. So I went with a board and batten siding, except I faked it. So I wanted to try this. In some ways, I treat some of my home projects as a little bit of experiment for like other projects I might work on. Like, does this hold up? Does it work? Does it not? And so I went with I bought exterior grade plywood and I just put it up along the whole outside, and then I bought pre-primed like finger jointed pine, and I just put battens right over it, and you know, I laid out the battens. Obviously, I knew I was going to have them on 4-foot centers, so I covered my plywood seams. And then I I think I did 2 more battens in. I think they were on 16 centers, so it looked just like framing spacing, which is perfect for plywood because you hit all the seams and you get 2 in between. And it looks great. I mean,
that's what I did on my gable ends.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know you went over plywood.
Yep, and holding up great.
Yeah, it's
exterior grade plywood, and mine's on furring strips, so it's not. There's plenty of airflow
Same
behind
with mine,
it.
yeah.
You use those finger jointed pine battens?
I don't remember if they were finger joint. If I
don't know if mine were either,
but
but they were prime pine.
Those rot out in a year.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you want to make sure that you're not holding water in any place.
And do you have it overhang?
Certainly.
Do you have overhangs on this thing? Okay.
Yeah, I have an overhanging roof, and you got to worry about grade level. I'm actually going to put a gutter on this thing. I was not planning that, but
gutters work.
I'm going to put a gutter on the back and just get all the water away from the board and batten that I can.
Yep.
Because that's when you get the water drips down and it splashes back up. That's when you start to have problems.
End grain of those.
It's a lot of end grain. Yeah.
You have a trim board at the bottom, or does it just go right down? You do.
Trim board at the bottom, which is, you know, it looks good and it can be a problem.
Yeah.
Both. I mean, it raises the end grain of those battens up higher so that you're not close to the ground where they're going to get wet, but it also creates a nice shelf for the water to sit on and soak up into them. So it's sort of both problems in one. But for anybody who's looking to do this detail, when you're shopping for plywood, make sure that you're looking, you know, in every sheet of plywood, you're going to see that black stamp from the factory kind of inked onto the plywood on the backside. And it's you're going to see some that it's exposure 1 rated and some that are exterior. Exposure 1 rated plywood is meant to kind of survive through wet conditions while it's being built, but it's not for extended use outside. Exterior is meant to stay, you know, over its long haul life exposed to the weather.
What'd you pay per sheet for that stuff?
This was the other part of the experimentation. I used pretty thin stuff. I got I think it was 1/4 or 3/8 sheets because it was going over furring strips. It wasn't structural. It was only to provide a skin smooth surface. So I was like, I wonder if I can just go with the thin stuff. It's not doing anything but looking good. And I have furring strips that I was nailing it into solidly everywhere. So
it's flat?
I think it was like $18 a sheet or something. Yeah, it's dead flat. It looks really good to me. I haven't painted it yet, and I haven't finished it, so I'm not going to share any photos yet. But
and you're going to paint it with the Graco sprayer?
Yeah, hell yes, I am.
Cool.
I get to put a gutter on this weekend if it gets warm enough to be out there and doesn't rain. Brian, we got some feedback. Somebody's taking you to task.
Let's get at it.
It's a listener rant.
It's a good letter.
It is a good letter.
Right.
It's a little bit long. So Josh writes, "Hi guys, I love the podcast. It's become a regular part of my weekly routine. But it was with a mix of interest and hair-pulling exasperation that I listened to your discussion about net zero requirements in California, particularly the idea of making it a code requirement. I'm all on board with the idea that people should go as far as they can toward reaching the goals of green building best practices. We are looking to buy a home in the next few months here in California, and we'll seek to make any modifications we can toward that goal. But I am completely opposed to making it a code requirement. First, justifying it based on the argument that it's about safety is an absurd expansion of what building code should be about. Building codes set a minimum standard of safety, defined as the building isn't going to fall down on me, I can get out if there's a fire, I shouldn't have sewage in my potable water, etc. They shouldn't be there to set the standard for best practices. If you can justify net zero with a safety argument, why not make the WUI standards, which is wildfire urban interface?
Yeah.
Why not make the WUI standards a requirement across the state, or fire sprinklers? Also, for someone buying a home today, which I am, they can count on their mortgage consuming anywhere from 35 to 50% of their monthly income. When you add in PV arrays, battery backup, more expensive wall assemblies, and etc. to the upfront cost, it adds to the upfront cost, and arguing otherwise defies logic. So there are plenty of arguments to be made that people should demand and buy a net zero home. And he said, heck, we would buy one if we could afford it. But why should all of this be a code requirement? Are typical code-built homes as good as they could be? Of course not. But I think you'd have a hard time convincing most people that they aren't safe. And this, if you go back to, what episode was that? 106.
The last one.
Yeah, about 20 minutes in or so, we were talking about our next year's project, this net zero home that we're following the progress of in California. California has this 2020. Is that what they're calling it?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 challenge.
That's what we're calling it.
Well, no, I mean,
that's what they named it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's a few ways that people are referencing it, but it's essentially going to be requiring all new residential homes to be zero energy by 2020.
Right.
And commercial buildings by 2030.
So we were batting around that topic, and Brian was a firm proponent of thinking it was a great idea that their code required. This guy, we didn't talk about it for too long. We kind of breezed by it and started going on to other topics, but I thought we should dig this back up based on this letter. And, he makes a fair point that codes in their traditional form have been about maintaining safety standards. It's building so your house, follow these rules so that your house will stay standing, that you will be safe in the house, both in terms of air quality and water contamination and
it's health,
air quality most recently.
Well, it's health and safety.
Health and safety. So this guy is saying, so the building codes have no right or have no place telling me that I have to build a house that produces as much energy as it consumes, because that's not a health or safety problem. So what do you think, Brian?
First, I'll just respond to a couple of points in his letter.
Okay.
And the first one is that is about, well, let's just talk about the WUI standards and fire sprinklers. So the reason that the WUI standards don't need to be mandated statewide or countrywide is because wildfires that they're meant to protect against aren't issues statewide or countrywide.
Right.
I would, and I don't want to argue with Josh. I don't want to argue about this at all. But if I were having this conversation with Josh, I would suggest that some of the issues that we're dealing with, that and the reasons why we would build to zero energy standard, are issues not only countrywide but worldwide. So that's a regional thing. These issues are not.
Yeah, I think what you had mentioned before is that that WUI standard are implemented in areas and regions where it's necessary,
where they're needed.
And I think your argument was that energy efficiency, or at least an awareness,
yes,
is necessary.
It's necessary everywhere right now.
Yes, that's your point.
The second thing about, he mentioned fire sprinklers, and fire sprinklers have been adopted. I don't think California doesn't use the IRC. They still use the NFPA 5000,
something like that,
for the building codes or whatever it is. The one from the that's actually written by the Fire Association. But I'm not sure about that, but I know for a long time they weren't on the IRC. The rest of the country is. Fire sprinklers have actually been adopted by the IRC because statistics show that a home with fire sprinklers is a safer home.
Yeah, but
now regional people haven't necessarily adopted this everywhere.
Right.
Some places do, some places don't. That's how building codes work.
Right.
And as you get closer and closer to the regional building codes, they get different and different around the country. That's the way it works. I don't know how that actually goes in California because they have adopted a different book, and maybe it's a statewide code that might be a little different. Certain states have laws that say that every time there's a new IRC, it's adopted. I think Maryland is one of those states, and so they just adopt it. Maybe when you get down to the local levels, they exempt certain things. We haven't seen a whole lot of new homes with fire sprinklers yet, but again, they have been adopted by the ICC, the International Code Council. So just clarify a couple of his points.
In your mind, is there a correlation between what you're talking about and what you're arguing for standards in housing? Is it, can you make the correlation to fuel efficiency standards for automobiles and emission standards for automobiles? Because it's kind of the same thing. Like there's a direct impact based upon like the vehicle that's on the road or the house that's built in a neighborhood, but you're really talking about a larger level of safety, security, and health.
Sure. And, listen, I wish it was as simple as, we have lots of things in this.
So you're saying, sure, but I'm saying, like, is that that's your point, right?
That is my point, yeah. And his idea that the building codes be so specific about structural safety, is, I wish it could be that simple. I wish we could deal with issues in our world one at a time, focus just on that issue. But in my opinion, that's not the way the world works. Like these things are linked, and homes are linked to, they're linked to environmental issues.
Right.
They're not just, so safety is not just will the building stand up or will the building fall down. When we build a house, it is absolutely linked to everything else in the chain of production and everything else in our world. So you can't just look at things that simply. And the codes are the system that we have for changing the way things are built. They're the best system we have for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're the only thing we have.
The only thing we have for it, yeah.
Governing.
Well, and Fine Homebuilding magazine.
So are you making the argument that this is kind of an instance where the code is stepping outside of thinking about just the house that you're building and thinking about the impact of the house that you're building on the greater picture? And then maybe this is the first step towards a greater accountability? Rather than just an individual accountability?
It's expanding the definition of safety.
Right.
If the building codes are for safety, it's expanding that definition, looking a little bit more globally at the big picture of the impact that homes have, not just on the people who live there, not just whether the roof's going to fall down on their head or not, but the impact on people in general, the impact that homes have on people, human beings.
For those who were confused
in general,
about
yes, human beings.
Yeah.
And it's not just, I know these can be politically charged issues when you start to bring up terms like climate change.
Sure.
But look, our population is some 7-point-something billion people, and by 2050, it's going to reach 10 billion people. It's going to, even if you could make a case that climate change is not at all caused by humans and that we have no effect on it, we have consumption. We have to have resources on this planet to now house 3 more billion people. We're almost gonna add 50% to our population in our lifetimes. Mm-hmm. So even it could just be resources that we're talking about here. And energy is a huge resource.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So that's how I look at it. It's of course this is my opinion. So it's not right or wrong. Josh,
what do you think, Rob?
But
I do.
It's an interesting point that we really don't have any other means of enforcing it. Like the EPA is the body that regulates something like the fuel efficiency standards. So, I guess they could step in and say, not only do you have to follow building codes, but you have to follow EPA standards on energy use for your house. I don't know.
I think if you look at the science and you look at the taxation on our resources because of our behavior, and we can modify our behavior to be less wasteful or more aware of how we're utilizing our resources, then it's hard to argue against doing that. It is definitely a politically charged issue because it changes the game when the government or a code agency or jurisdiction says that you have to do something, and I get the sensitivity to that. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish people were just aware and trusted and believed in expert insights and then modified their approach accordingly, but that's not necessarily the world that we live in. So I am in favor of, I guess, seeing progression in the codes and seeing progression in how we build houses. And that is inclusive, that is inclusive of moving beyond, does a house stand or does it fall down? Because we talk about energy efficiency. That's one aspect of building in the way that we advocate for. There's a whole host of other reasons, including health and comfort, environmental impact, resource impact. We're talking about durability, houses that are going to last a long time, that are going to be better to live in. Mm-hmm. They seem like good things. But I do get the economic conversation too. That at least at this point, some of these things are going to add to the upfront cost. But cost is one of those things that you tune those dials to meet your needs or to meet your budget. Mm-hmm. And so where you're going to allocate that budget is discretionary. So you could, blow it out on a 6,000 square foot house with a 4-car garage and, a game room in the basement, if that's what you want. Or you might have to, carve some of that budget out for PV on the roof.
Yeah, and I think this might be retreading our conversation on the last show, but, we see all the time zero-energy houses that are way more expensive than the average house, and we see all the time zero-energy houses that cost less than the average house.
Yeah, it's all over the map. So you can't, he is saying that it'll add to the upfront cost. And I think that is
if you don't change
true.
Anything else in the house that you're going to build, sure, it's going to add.
Yeah, and I definitely get that that financing has not caught up with this. Mm-hmm. How houses are appraised and valued, and the complications that you get through or that you run into when you're trying to finance this kind of build. When the bank is not going to acknowledge any of these premiums,
right?
And they don't really care about the long-term operating cost and the fact that you are going to either save or recoup that money, the payback period on that upfront investment. It's relatively short depending upon what your fuel source is and your climate and all that kind of stuff. It's just not factored in at this point.
Yeah.
But I think we should still keep on pushing.
I might tend to lean more towards Josh's point of view, though, that I'm just not sure that it should be required by building code. I just wonder if it should be highly incentivized to encourage you, to make it like brainless for you to go that direction. Like you'd be foolish to not take the next steps because your house is going to be better, your client's life will be better, and you're going to get, as a builder, you'll get these great incentives to make it happen. But it's not really a minimum requirement for a house. Otherwise, I don't know. I feel like I'm missing the proof of that.
Is there a real definition that says? That's what we hear. That's what I often hear people say. We say it around the office that the codes are the minimum requirement to build a safe house. Is that true? Does the ICC say anywhere we're giving you the minimum requirement to build a safe house?
No, but that's where it started from. It was standards that you had to achieve in order to, to maintain safe and healthy homes. It started out as plumbing, as we know, because they had a huge sewage problem, and then it's reactive, like we've talked about before. Then there's the fire crisis, and so now you have to incorporate fire things, and I'm sure there were structural failures.
And code built houses are like, we also hear, it's the cheapest way or the easiest way you can legally build a house. I would argue that a code built house structurally is a freaking sound good house.
Yeah.
Like, it's not minimum.
Right.
And I would argue that a lot of the building process is code is best practices. You don't need to do any more. You're not going to make the house better. You're just going to make the house overbuilt.
Yes.
In a lot of places by doing any more than the code.
Sure.
So it's not minimum. It's how you should build a house.
But I think those codes have evolved over time based upon our learning and our experience and the context in which we're building.
Of course. And with new materials and different styles of houses. And Yes.
And so at some level, I think it needs to keep pace with that.
Yes.
Well, I don't think we solved anything here today.
But I definitely want to hear more feedback from.
I would like
because Josh's letter was like super level-headed, and he's got a really great point. And on some level, I think I'm with you, Justin. I do like the idea of incentivizing.
Yeah.
This kind of thing, as opposed to just making it like a binding legal kind of like forceful thing. But I don't know. I want to hear more opinions.
Well, and that will, and I'm no economist, so I can't say what they would be, but incentivizing then has its economic implications that have their whatever their trickle out effect is, and so who knows what the effect of incentivizing is. We also know that this is California, that is also in a tough place with housing, with the housing market being super expensive and super competitive, and so
my understanding is also there's some people will call it overreach, right?
Yeah.
I just talked to a builder last week who he went through a 36-month permitting process
in California because the amount of regulation and hoops that they have to jump through there's a lot that they're dealing with, yeah.
And so I don't know if they've got it totally figured out, but I don't know.
But California's got to work on those issues too. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I did.
No one's going to be able to afford to live there.
One thing that we should point out, and that we're not really following here, is that apparently the Department of Energy has settled on what they are calling zero energy, and because there's a lot of we through the years in the magazine we've called it net zero, we've called it zero net energy as opposed to net zero, and the Department of Energy is settled on zero energy. That's what they're calling it. So we're dropping the net. You heard it here. One other thing I wanted to point out, which I find really interesting, is net zero, or I guess we can still call that net zero water, which I feel like is where we're going next.
Explain that.
Well, I mean, there's no shortage of news reports and things about water shortage and how we're consuming more than we can. We're outpacing the resources. We have shortages, droughts.
I wrote an article about this a number of years ago.
So the move towards decentralized water treatment seems like a smart choice.
What does that mean?
So it would mean essentially gray water systems. It could mean on-site treatment, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I know that a lot of gray water systems use filtration and sterilization and UV treatments and things, so that incoming gray water that you're going to use, not just for flushing toilets, but also for taking a drink of water is fully safe. So at that point, and I don't know what the definition of net zero water is, just rainwater collection and usage. Is it really like a closed loop? Like I have 1,000 gallons and I neither add or subtract from that?
I don't think that's
not really feasible.
That's
but
amazing to think about.
But so I wonder if what's the progress towards that? Is anybody looking into that and making pushes for it? We talk a lot in the magazine and a lot on this podcast about energy use. We don't touch water use nearly at all.
I'd like to revisit that because I just mentioned we should maybe dig up that article because it maybe is still relevant. I did it 6 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, on this very subject, and it was really fascinating.
Kind of the crisis, but
the crisis, and talked about what is happening, what are some of the requirements that, again, likely California is leading the charge on. It's a regional thing. Seemingly, it's a regional thing. Although even here in the Northeast, was it last year or the year before? We went through a pretty severe drought, and it was very scary, actually, driving around here, looking at some of the reservoirs and how low they were.
Yeah.
And you could actually see it. I mean, most people, they don't pay attention until they see something right in front of their face. And when we saw, I don't know at what capacity those reservoirs were at, but it was like those reservoirs became rivers.
Yeah, it was weird.
And you started thinking there's something going on.
Well, it's the classic example of we've got enough right now that it's easy to just overlook it. Whatever, I take that for granted. I got water. I turn on the tap, I got water.
Right.
And then it's until you don't, and then you're like, oh, shit. What am I going to do about this? You know?
Yeah.
So.
I also, Josh also said that I had the wrong pronunciation of one of our great states.
I forgot about that. So why don't you correct yourself, Rob? He actually sent a YouTube video with the correct pronunciation.
It's pretty funny because my wife gives me the same, because my wife's from the Midwest and she corrects me as well. I say East Coast, or I say Nevada, which is not the correct pronunciation.
According to Josh.
I think it's Nevada.
I say Nevada too.
It's Nevada.
I say Nevada too.
How do you pronounce the state between Washington and California?
Oregon?
Oh, yeah,
Oregon?
That's a tough one too.
I believe it's pronounced Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon is what I say.
Instead of Oregon. Sometimes I say Oregon, and I get corrected.
We're off the rails.
Yeah.
Off the rails, folks.
That's your trivia.
Documentary.
So Tim writes to us, "What's up, guys? I'm wrapping up 2 desks with drawer cabinets, and the style is based on Justin's Fine Home Building bathroom vanity build and Fine Woodworking's build a computer desk." We have links to both those on the show notes page, which is finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Tim goes on, "I liked Justin's simple shaker style for the vanity, but I went my own way on the cabinet construction technique. I glued, screwed, notched full-length legs to a biscuit-joined 3/4-inch plywood box, and then essentially trimmed out the plywood box to give it a rail and style look without all the rail and style fuss. To me, this type of cabinet construction makes a lot of sense. It's super strong, efficient to build and keep square, and the drawer hardware attaches easily. At first, I thought this was all my own idea, but then yesterday I realized Brian built his kitchen cabinets this way back in episode 44 and recently installed in episode, 109? And I apparently subconsciously copied him. So my question is, why aren't more drawer cabinets, vanities, built-ins, etc. built like this? What am I missing? I see a lot of traditional frame and panel casework and some hybrid casework like what Justin did, but not much like Brian's simple casework. So we should probably, this being an audio show, try to
describe what's going on here.
Try to kind of summarize these different building techniques. So, and I've got the articles that he talked about here. So let's talk about like a kitchen cabinet. Kitchen cabinet is essentially a bunch of plywood joined together into a box shape, and then European style would just be you would apply melamine or something to that front edge, not melamine,
edge banding,
to that exposed edges of the plywood, and then you would hang a door on it, and that was your cabinet, or install drawers, and they would be full overlay. That's kind of the Euro style.
So that there are no face frames.
No face frame.
Everything just meets. The drawer fronts meet. The doors meet. Yes.
You're just using sheet goods.
And we could point out while we're talking about that people like that style not only for the look, but they say that it sort of increases your ability to get in and out of your cabinets.
Yes,
you're not taking up any space with any intermediate, especially where you have 2 doors joining in maybe an upper. You don't have this intermediate rail that's sort of in your way
or eating up.
You can just
space.
Or eating up space.
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, it's a very slim margin,
yes.
but that's the case that gets made sometimes.
Yes. From an installer point of view, they can be harder to get to install square. Well, not harder, but more likely to be accidentally pulled out of square.
You don't have that stiffening system in the front.
Right. So then you have the face frame option, which is the same plywood or whatever sheet good box that you construct a solid wood, like a picture frame essentially, that you apply to the front. Then you hang your drawers or hardware off of, the drawers, doors, or whatever hardware off of that face frame. Face frame works similar to the back panel on the cabinet. It stiffens it and helps keep it strong and square, and it sort of changes the look. It now opens up possibilities of inset drawers and all that stuff. Now, what he's talking about is sort of, it's almost like a hybrid of these 2 different articles that he referenced. When we did, and Rob shot the photos in this, so you can help me out here, Rob, but when we did this Build Your Own Bathroom Vanity article, it was plywood cases, just like you would have in a Euro cabinet, except we wanted it to have, so we wanted the smooth interior, the maximizing of the storage that Brian's talking about, but we wanted it to look like a face frame. So we aligned the inside edges of the face frame with the inside edges of the plywood case, but then padded out the exterior so that it was also flush on the outside face of the face frame. So there's pieces of plywood here that are just kind of faux, just kind of filling up space.
And let's just point out, you can do that same thing with if you design your cabinets so that as you're bringing your boxes together, you're joining two boxes. You now have 1.5 inches of plywood, and you can put an 1.5 inch face frame on that, and get that same thing without taking up necessarily more space than you need if you're doing a kitchen install.
Yes.
Like vanity's different because that's like more like a piece of furniture than a kitchen install.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
But you can do the same thing and join boxes.
Yes. And then the woodworking article was, I mean, it's more woodworking, obviously. They're using mortise and tenon joinery. They're not using pocket screws and that kind of thing. They essentially are using, let's call them 2x2 legs, 2 inch by 2 inch. They're probably smaller than that, and then they use thinner rails and stiles. And for people who don't know, the rails are the horizontal pieces on the cabinet. The stiles are the vertical pieces. And they just stuck those rails into those wider legs, so you have that nice little reveal, that little change in the surface, so it's not all flat and flush. But this is more like the woodworking example is sort of like a traditional case piece, like you would build a chest of drawers or something.
Mostly out of solid wood.
Yeah.
I mean, I think those panels, I don't even know if those panels are plywood, or are they glue-ups?
No, I think they're solid wood.
Solid wood glue-ups.
Yeah, but it's woodworking, and it's gorgeous. It's a gorgeous looking desk.
Yep.
But then you have kind of Brian's hybrid approach that he invented, obviously. The first one ever to do it, was to build a plywood box and then essentially apply 4 legs to the corners.
Correct.
So you just notch. Did you use 2 pieces of flat stock joined together to make the look of a thick leg? Did you?
No, I used thick.
So you started with like a
lumber.
2x2 and then cut out a little section of it and nested it onto the corner.
Correct. Yeah, I bought roughs on like 8/4.
Okay.
Material. I milled it down and made the legs to whatever dimensions I settled on.
Just 2 rips on the table saw, right?
For the notch.
Yeah.
And then I think I made the notch with 2 rips on the table saw. Yes, chiseled out the.
Yeah.
And then how
bottom
did you attach that leg to the case, to the plywood case? Just with screws from the interior, or?
Oh boy.
a little PL.
I think I glued and clamped. it.
Okay, so no
I don't think I
real
used any
fasteners.
No.
So it's just glued.
It's
on
really easy to just now clamp those in and leave it clamped up overnight, and you're done.
Yeah, and so the advantages of Brian's approach here is that it looks more like a piece of furniture.
It looks very much like a piece of furniture.
But it's made out of plywood.
Yep. It's got a nice install system, which is you have these 4 legs, and now you bring it in and you put it in place. You stick a level on top, and you just trim little bits off the legs to get the thing level.
Yeah.
And then are you pocket screwing your face frame to those legs?
The legs are the face frame. And then
that's the thing, yeah.
And then the drawers.
But I mean, like the rails.
The drawers just sit within that.
The rails that. Oh, okay. So you don't have like. Is there another photo of his approach here?
Well, his is a little bit. Is what this guy sent in the same as that you did, Brian?
It's very close.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very close.
Did Jeff go back to the top? Oh, I guess you can see. You can see right there, Rob. So he's got let's call them 2-inch legs, and then he's got 3/4 inch or 1 inch.
Yeah.
Rails and stiles. So he's got that nice reveal. So it looks like they're real furniture legs with traditional mortise and tenon joinery.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing that rail is secured to that leg somehow. I'm guessing via a pocket screw.
I'm pretty sure that Brian did not do that on his, because I know Brian.
Oh, I don't have rails like that on mine.
You probably
quite
face
like
nailed
that.
it.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Face nailed it. Face screwed it with a drywall screw.
Where's it going to go? But in order to do it, what you're talking about, you would have to attach the rails and stiles to those legs with, let's say, pocket screws or dominoes or whatever. And we're going to get into that in a minute. Separate question.
Yeah. And then apply
and then
it
you
all.
have to apply like one half at a time.
Yeah.
Which, that's sort of like what we did on the vanity.
Yeah.
Now the downside here, or he's talking in general. Like his was a big general question. Why don't more people do this? In terms of a kitchen, there's nothing to scribe. So you don't have a leg that you're going to really scribe to a wall very well here. And again, like I said, it's a great easy leveling system, but you don't have a way like a face frame. You leave a little bit extra for your scribe.
Yep.
There's no filler strips.
Yeah.
In a style like this, and you can't actually put. My kitchen has sort of different for a certain look, it has a couple different types of cabinets,
right?
And broken up often by the appliances. But you can't join two of these together, because now you have two legs meeting,
right?
So this is like a down and dirty way to like create some standalone furniture.
It's a great way to do it.
They're almost like furniture. In fact, one of my cabinets stands in the kitchen, not backed up against the wall. It looks more like a piece of furniture. It's the same exact build as the others, but it's not actually built in.
You also don't have a toe kick in this setup, which is kind of a pain for kitchen cabinets or anything like that, because you're going to lose a lot of dust and crumbs and everything underneath the cabinets. And by the nature of the way a traditional plywood cabinet's built, you have an easy way to build that little toe kick that goes against the floor.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's kind of the real answer for why people
you don't see those crumbs and dust anyway. I mean, what do you want to keep them out for? You push them in.
Yeah, that's where you hide them.
Instead of trying to clean up your floor, you just sweep it underneath and you're done.
Nah, I got the dog. The dog cleans all that stuff up for me. But yeah, that's essentially. Did you do the same thing that he did on the bottom though, where he did those little supports?
No, those supports. He took it to the next level.
The little angled
little braces. Yeah, I'm not sure why he did that.
To support the bottom of the cabinet.
What do you call those things? What's the term for that?
I don't know. They're not
glue
cleats.
block.
They're
glue block.
I guess
there you
it
go,
was,
Jeff.
I guess it was just nailing for his rails.
I like this technique. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense
in the
for
right
built-ins
context
that are meant to look like they're not built in.
Yes.
Yeah. But for kitchen cabinets and things, it becomes too much of a workaround hassle.
Yes. If you're just your average kitchen where you have multiple cabinets joined and all that stuff.
There's nowhere to hide in terms of fitting it, and it looks awkward once you're done when it's all ganged together.
Yeah. And I don't have any uppers that match, so I don't know what an upper would look like that matches this. I have open shelves. So yeah.
Are you gonna ever write an article on this?
No.
Okay. That's good.
So we mentioned in this question in the answer to this question, we started talking about joinery a little bit. So we had a question from Chris that I thought we'd lump in here. Chris writes, gentlemen, when it comes to hidden joinery, what are your thoughts on biscuits, dominoes, and pocket screws? Do you have a favorite or use all three? So for people who don't know the options, Brian.
I love this question. Here's why I love this question. Because I've been hearing so much about the domino system lately while I'm out on the road with builders.
Yeah.
And I keep asking them, why do you like the domino? Why do you like the domino? And they keep telling me that it's stronger. Like this is a stronger joint. I keep asking them, did your biscuit joints fail? And they keep saying no.
Never had a failure.
Did you have any problem with pocket screws? They keep saying no. And so I'm wondering so why do you like the domino? I go back to the question. So why is the domino so much better? Why did you pay so much money for this tool?
Yeah. Well,
why is it better?
I can tell you one way that it is different is so people who don't know, a biscuit is like a little flat oval shaped biscuit. It looks like a biscuit. It's like a little wafer.
Yeah.
It looks like a wafer of wood, and you cut a little slot in one side of each piece, and then put them together with glue. And the glue makes that biscuit swell and lock the joint together. It swells and locks, and it also dries the glue and locks. Great way to join all sorts of different connections.
And a great way just to align things often.
Yes, oftentimes
it's a helpful alignment tool. You're doing a glue up or something.
Even if used dry without glue, it's great to get things into alignment. Pocket screws come in from the backside at a slight angle, so it joins one piece to the other without the screw poking through on the show side.
And without clamping and waiting for the glue to dry.
Exactly. So that's kind of one of the benefits for why pocket screws excelled.
Sometimes you have to clamp to get into alignment, right?
Right, but you don't have to leave it clamped up,
correct.
and it's done once you've screwed it in. Your joint's done.
Right.
For sure.
Limitations there being if you see the backside, the backside is not hidden in some way, then you're going to see the screws. They make little plugs you can put in there, but come on.
Exactly.
And then the domino system, which is genius from Festool's point of view. Festool makes this little rig, is that everyone just calls them dominoes now. You're going to use dominoes there, but they're really floating tenons. Or sorry, loose tenons.
Loose tenons.
Yeah. So the difference between those and biscuits are that biscuits you really can't do a deep, narrow plunge in order to put a biscuit in. A biscuit is kind of long.
It takes up more width.
Yes. So if you have, let's say, a rail joining a stile, you're limited by the width of the rail. If your rail is 1.5 inches wide, you're not going to be able to fit a biscuit in there without the cuts starting to peek through on the edges. So in those cases, you can use a domino, which plunges deeper in. And also, by the nature of it plunging deeper in, it will be stiffer and stronger. So,
are there different sized dominoes though? I mean, can that
yes.
tool be modified to take a different width?
You can change the cutter diameter. It looks like it's like a cross between a drill bit and a router bit inside there. And what it does is it spins, and then it oscillates side to side to cut like a slot as you plunge. So you can change the diameter of the bit, and you can change how much it oscillates, so how wide the slot is, and the depth of it. So you have 3 different controls there. In some cases, so is there confusion about what all these different things are used for at this point, like how they function? Because I have different thoughts about where I use each one.
I don't think the audience could respond.
Okay. Does everyone speak up if anyone's confused?
I didn't hear anything, so go ahead.
So I have all 3 of these, and I use all 3. Pocket screws I love for their speed, and if they're hidden, awesome. I use them all the time, especially backside of face frames. I don't find that they are as strong as domino tenons, but I'm okay with that because it's usually the face frame's joined to a case, and the case is strong. So
how do you know they're not as strong?
Well, I can just there's by nature of the fact. I mean,
do you put glue in your pocket hole joints?
I didn't used to, but Mike Maines convinced me to do it. So
and
now
once
I do
the glue is dry, do you still feel like they're not as strong?
You're gluing end. If we're talking about like a rail and style connection, if you're gluing end grain to edge grain, that glue's adding maybe 10%. Like it's not the same. End grain doesn't glue well.
To Brian's point, what is making you say that they're not as strong?
Well, because I've broken pieces that are pocket screwed
you've
together.
tried to step on them and
and they will break. It's not that they're not strong, but they're not as strong as a tenon that extends in.
Interesting.
But my point being that they are strong enough in just about every case.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at.
Like all these options are strong enough.
Well, I would never use a biscuit for that situation, though, because you can't get the biscuit really in there deep enough for me to feel satisfied. The biscuit feels like it's not adding strength. It's keeping it aligned and keeping the joint closed, maybe.
What do you think that's the weakest of the 3?
But I don't see it as... I think it's the weakest in terms of its application, range of possible applications. But I don't think it's a weak tool. Like, I love it for gluing up tabletops or panels or something, because it's really quick to make the slots. The slots have some wiggle room.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be dead on in terms of sometimes with the domino, you can make one hole really tight and one wider so that you have some sliding ability.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's almost too precise. Like the precision of it becomes a hassle, like when joining miters with a domino or something. Dominoes are super expensive to buy the wood stock that you put in there. I've actually just started making my own. And the other nice thing about both the domino and the biscuit that you can't do with the pocket screw is if you're going to be assembling something that you know you have to trim, but you don't know yet exactly how you're going to trim it, let's say to scribe it or to cut a notch into it for something or whatever, you have no risk of hitting a screw.
A screw.
And that's great. A great example of that is if you're gluing up a face frame, you'll put that bottom piece on, glue up the whole face frame, and then you're going to come back and you're going to kind of cut faux bracket feet on the bottom. I've run into situations where you go, oh, crap, I use pocket screws to put this face frame together. Now I can't cut into this without, A, hitting a pocket screw, which you can solve by going, all right, it's already glued up. I'm going to back this one screw out. But then when you cut the profile, you're cutting into that pocket, and now you have a hole that you can see through the edge. If you do that with something like a domino tenon that is perfectly sized for the slot and perfectly pushed in there, you can cut right through that. And you know,
you're going to see it.
If it's paint grade,
if it's paint grade,
you can paint over it. Yeah. And you're not going to damage your blades, or it's not going to catch you by surprise. You know what I mean? So there's for joining like mitered casing together, like window and door casing, I like the biscuit because it's wide and skinny. So like a thin piece of casing, you can get it right in there, and it maximizes the width. Let's say like a 3.5-inch casing. You can get a nice wide biscuit in there. It doesn't plunge too deep, and it doesn't take up a lot of height. So that's really excellent for that. And it still offers a little bit of slop, so you can adjust it top to bottom, side to side. So I think they all have a place.
Yeah.
I used to hate biscuits, and you loved them, but I've come around to using them in a bunch of contexts. It's also a great way to join, let's say, like a fixed cabinet shelf to a cabinet side, because you don't have any fasteners going in from the outside, and you don't see anything either. So you couldn't use pocket screws in that situation. You got to get all three. You got to have all three.
Maybe we could grab this article, but Fine Woodworking a couple of years ago did a joinery shootout where they tested.
That was an awesome article.
They tested 18 different joints in a scientific manner, and
that was prior to the domino, though, right?
That was prior to the domino. So they do have the pocket screw in here, and the biscuit. No, they do have the domino.
Really?
Yep. Oh, and guess what? The pocket screw is the strongest of the three.
Really?
Yeah.
What they do? They just did like one piece joined to the other.
They
like
did a diagonal compression test to simulate racking forces.
So they essentially created that joint between the horizontal rail and the vertical stile. So it's end grain to side grain, edge grain.
Yeah, like how you would normally do it. And I think it. So I don't know what metric they were doing here. They just have the weight. And so before it broke, the pocket screw came in at 698 pounds of force. The domino was 597 pounds.
Really?
So about 100 pounds difference there. And then the biscuit was at 545 pounds.
So the biscuit was the least.
Yeah. And then the bottom ones are the cope and stick, and then the stub tenon is the weakest. Which we've done the stub tenons on doors.
We did the stub tenon on the bathroom vanity article.
On the cabinet doors. I mean, there's not a lot of
there's no stress on it.
Not a stress on there, but that's only supporting 200 pounds. The strongest. I mean, we'll see if we can get this and put it up because it's a great article. Strongest joint is the half lap.
What's the name of that article for people that are? I think joinery shootout.
Over 1,600 pounds. That thing.
Wait, which one is 1,600?
Half lap.
Yeah, because you got so much.
Then they got
the
then they've got the bridle, the splined miter. Then they get into some mortise and tenon joinery. So it's called Joinery Shootout, and it was by Douglas Moore and Tom McKenna, who's now the editorial director at Fine Woodworking.
If you're like getting started or in the market for a tool for this kind of thing,
you should test all these joints. I agree, Brian.
And you have the money, and you want to go for a great, well designed, tool and buy something like the domino. That's great, but I think we've all taken apart kitchen cabinets that were built in place with finish nails, and they've held up pretty well.
Yeah.
And
especially those old school nails. They're so hard to get out.
And they're pretty well. They've held up pretty well, and they're pretty hard to take apart.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't look good anymore, so we're taking them out. But
so are you going to now go back to all those builders and shoot them an email and say, you know what, the domino's actually not the strongest. It's actually not stronger.
Yeah, well, I stand corrected. The data has proven me wrong. I wonder if there are. I don't really know what I'm thinking of when I say that. I just feel like there's certain things that I've done with pocket screws that didn't hold up as well, and maybe that was just by nature of what I was trying to get out of the pocket screw. I don't know.
Well, I've noticed that if you pocket screw a window casing together, for example, and you put some glue in there, you pocket screw it, and now that you've got the screws in there, so you're like, I can go install this right away, and those joints are still like going to move a little bit, but the glue isn't set up yet.
Right.
So once the glue has set up, it's going to be now you have those screws, but you also have a glue joint. And if you put like you said, glue doesn't take to end grain so great, but if you put enough glue in there and spread it out, and then it should be a pretty solid.
It's the quantity
glue
that matters,
joint.
Rob.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, you can underglue.
Yeah. Sure.
What's undergluing in your point of view?
Not having the surface.
No, I know, but
what
is the signs? Do you always want to have squeeze out? Is that what you're aiming for?
I don't want to clean it up.
So
a little less than squeeze out.
so how do you know if you're putting enough on then?
I think you want some squeeze out and clean it up.
Yeah. You want to squeeze out.
And just FYI, this wasn't some back of the napkin kind of science that woodworking, just made up a test themselves. I think they partnered with a research engineering lab in Rhode Island to.
It's probably one of the best articles I've ever seen in any magazine.
Yeah, it's pretty.
It's like,
it's great.
Everybody shut up and look at this results. Now what? Yeah. Come at me, bro.
Yep. Cool.
All right. Well, the clock still says the same time, but I feel like we've been doing this for a while, so it must be time to call it quits. So that's going to wrap us up. If you have questions, FHBpodcast@taunton.com. We'd also like to hear anybody's thoughts on that net zero code requirement, where you use pocket screws versus biscuits versus tenons. And what was the other thing we talked about? Oh, the cabinet construction. So check out those pictures. Picture's gonna be worth 1,000 words there. So that's it for this week. Stay tuned for next week. We've got some great guests coming up, some more cool questions, and we will catch you guys next time. In the meantime, keep craft alive and happy building.